All right, Dad the Dungeon Master here, and we're going to continue our DM's guide for Phandelver and Below, the Shattered Obelisk. Today we're talking about Chapter 1. Now, as I talked about in the first video, you can either start your party on the road to Phandalin already, or you can start in Neverwinter and have Grundrin Rockseeker send them on this quest. Either way, the book starts with you already on the Triboar Trail. You've headed down the King's Road from Neverwinter, and the book expects you to be playing in Faerun, the Forgotten Realms, but it's real easy, like with all their modules, to just take this and plug it right into your world if you're playing in a homebrew world or in another setting. So, your party's already on the road. They've got the wagon full of supplies pulled by 2 oxen from Grundrin Rockseeker. They come around a bend in the Triboar Trail, which they've been traveling on for several hours. The book says that whoever wants to can drive the wagon without any issue, without any skill check, and that's fine. But one of the things that I like to do, and I think is good to do if you're a dungeon master, is reward your players for their proficiencies, play to their strengths. So, you're trying to make them feel like heroes. So if you do happen to have a player that has animal handling or land vehicles proficiency, I'd let them roll a check, because they're going to be like, I know how to drive, I've got land vehicles, and let them enjoy having that, because it's not going to come up a lot. So, you have them travel down Triboar Trail on the wagon, and they come around a bend, and they see 2 horses kind of milling about in the way, in the middle of the path, and there's debris and belongings scattered about, and scraps of cloth and several arrows are scattered around the road. It looks like there was a recent battle. If your players ran into Grundrin in Neverwinter, or if you just want to tell them they recognize the horses, one as Grundrin's and one as his companion that he was traveling with. I personally would probably have them roll a history check. I would make the DC super low. The book doesn't give you a lot of specific rolls to have your characters make, but I think you should go ahead and get them rolling some checks just to get the ball rolling, get the flow moving. So one of your characters is probably going to want to go check out what's going on. So I would have them roll perception if they're looking from a distance. If they go and they start picking through the debris, I'd have them roll investigation. I have had multiple groups where they wanted to try and check the horse's saddlebags. The book doesn't say this, but I would have them roll an animal handling check to try and approach the horses and keep them calm, just because there was a battle here. And like I said, you want to have them roll some stuff. Rolling dice is like the most fun part of playing D&D. So again, don't make the DCs too high. You are dealing with level 1 characters. So if they can keep the horses calm and approach, the saddlebags are empty, most of the debris on the ground is meaningless, and they find like one leather case that looks like it holds a map, and it's empty. Remember, Grundrin did not mention the map when he sent them on this mission. He just said that there were big things going on. So when they approach the horses, that's when the book says to have 4 goblins attack, 2 on each side of the road. This is the map you're going to be dealing with. So the book basically just has the goblins jump out and attack, but I would use the mechanics of the game. I would have your goblins roll stealth against the player's passive perception, unless one of the players says, I'm on the lookout for what's going on. Because if there's arrows all over the place, you're guessing that it was a battle. Somebody may say that. And if they do, I would let them roll perception against the goblin's stealth to give them a chance to see them. And if they do see them, don't let the goblins have surprise. If the goblins, and I would just roll 1 check for all the goblins. I wouldn't roll 4 separate ones. But if the goblins beat either the perception check or the passive of your players, they surprise the players. Now, the book says there's 4 goblins. And the way that Wizards of the Coast kind of balances encounters is they plan on you having a party of 4, which is possible, but there's also a chance that you don't have a party of 4. You are level 1, you're very weak, it's very easy to get at least dropped unconscious, if not slain outright. So I would have an equal number of goblins to the number of players that you have, and no more. That way, it's a little more balanced. And they'll do combat if the players either choose to use non-lethal damage on one of the goblins, they can capture a goblin. Or what I would do and have done is, when you get down to the last goblin, I would have him throw his weapons down and be like, please, please don't hurt me. I didn't like these guys anyway. If you spare me, I will lead you to our hideout, the Cragmaw Hideout. Some parties are going to slay the guy right away. Some parties are going to negotiate with him. Whether all the goblins are dealt with, or if you have one prisoner afterward, if your party wants to search the area, or if the goblin explains it to them, there's a trail leading off to one side of the road. You can have your party roll a survival or a perception if anybody's good at that. It is kind of important that they find the trail. If they didn't, they could continue on to Phandalin, and one of the NPCs there will be like, hey, Grundra never made it, and send them back out to look for him. But it'll just be smoother and easier if they find the trail now. So when they find the trail, either the goblin shows them or they find it on their own. It is several sets of goblin footprints and drag marks like bodies have been dragged. Presumably Grundrin and his companion. So this trail, they call it the Goblin Trail. If you have a goblin leading you, it's very easy to follow. If not, I would have the party decide who's in the lead, who's leading the way, and I would have them roll survival checks. Again, not a very high DC. If your party thinks of hiding the wagon, I would have them roll survival for that too. Chances are at this level, I'm not going to have anybody like find the wagon or mess with the wagon, but a big part of DMing is letting your party believe that they are avoiding bad outcomes by being clever. So if they think to hide the cart, have them roll and, deal with whatever they roll, but hopefully they roll decent enough and you're like, okay, the cart's hidden pretty well. Nothing's going to happen to the cart either way, but you want them to think that it could. So as you follow the Goblin Trail, the book says it takes 5 miles to get to Cragmaw Hideout. Along that path are 2 traps. So have whoever's in the lead roll perception checks. If they roll high enough, they can avoid the traps. If they don't, they're going to end up having to roll saves to avoid the traps whenever they get triggered. Your goblin companion, if you have one, can tell you where the traps are and you can avoid them easily. And as a side note about the goblin companion, I've had a couple groups that did end up with a goblin that helped them. It's up to you whether or not he's going to betray them at some point. I personally think that it's a little cliche to have the goblin betray them. I had one group that ended up having a goblin NPC as like a companion that traveled with them for a good little while. And stuff happened later on down the road, and I'll tell you about that when we get to those chapters because I don't want to spoil it. But if your party ends up with a goblin NPC, I think it would almost be more fun for them if the goblin didn't betray them and did become like a little buddy to the party. Your choice. By the way, if you question the goblin, whether he's traveling with you or he's your prisoner, he can give you a few pieces of information. He can tell you that the leader of Cragmaw Hideout is a bugbear named Klarg. He can tell you that the goblin, King Groll, who is the leader of the Cragmaw Hand, which is this whole goblin tribe, is at Cragmaw Castle, and that a person named the Spider has paid him to have Klarg and his goblins capture Grundrin Rockseeker and all of his personal effects and send him off to Cragmaw Castle. The goblin can tell you where Sildar is being held. And he can also tell you about these strange goblins with elongated heads and some mysterious powers that have been joining in on some of the raids and then disappearing as soon as the raid was over. As you travel up the Goblin Trail, if you don't have a goblin leading you, there are 2 traps. The person in front needs to roll a perception check. On a DC 15 or higher, they see the traps. On anything lower than that, they don't. The first of the 2 traps is a snare. It's a DC 10 dexterity save, or it snatches their foot and hangs them up in the air. If somebody cuts them down without lowering them, they take a D6 falling damage. The second trap is a pit trap. Same thing, 15 DC perception to see it. DC 10 dex save to avoid it. And it's a D6 damage if they fall into the trap. Most of the time, your players are going to avoid the pit trap. Even if they don't see it, they're going to make that DC 10 dex save to avoid it. So if your party avoids it, not if they fall into it, I would flavor it up and say there's like some spikes at the bottom. So like, oh, that would have been bad. If they had fallen into it, I would not have had spikes there. It would have been 1d6. This is, again, managing your player's perception. Make it seem more dangerous if they avoid it, because they're going to be like, wow, I'm glad I avoided that. I probably would have been done. So at this point, either right after the battle with the goblins on the road or right before they get to Cragmaw Hideout, they avoided the traps, I would go ahead and have your players level up to level 2. The book says not to level up to level 2 until you finish chapter 1. Obviously, I love D&D. I really like Wizards of the Coast, but they have a bad habit of making level 1 missions, level 1 adventures that are very easily turned into TPKs. And it would be very unsatisfying if your party, especially a new party, all are slain the very first session. So before you get to Cragmaw Hideout, I would probably go ahead and do it after the goblin attack, but definitely by the end of the goblin trail, before they go into Cragmaw Hideout, I would level your players up to level 2 real quick. It doesn't take a lot to level to level 2. Most classes don't even get their subclass to level 3, so you just roll a little HP, maybe you get an extra spell slot, but mainly that extra HP is going to help them, because they're about to go through a whole dungeon, and if they're level 1, it's going to be very rough. So my advice is go ahead and get them to level 2. So you approach Cragmaw Hideout. Here's the map up here. Area H1 is just a flat, empty area of grass. And then you see a cave opening with a little stream. It's only like 2 feet deep. It's slow moving. It's cold water. Area H2 is an area that's a clearing, but it's protected by thickets, so you can't see it as you approach. In that area is 2 goblins and a goblin boss. They're supposed to be keeping watch. They are not particularly attentive at the time that the party shows up. The book says if the goblins are aware of the party, like if they fail their stealth checks or if they're loud crossing the river, the goblins in the thickets, using the thickets as cover, will just start firing on the party. I am not a huge fan of this. I had a really good DM in my past say that you should never have the bad guys attack first. Now, I don't think that that's a 100% rule. There are times, like maybe if you have assassins trailing one of your party members, yeah, they're going to jump him. But in this instance, for them to just attack is going to be not the best use of this situation. The reason why that DM said that is because you want to have a little more flavor, a little more role play, and let the enemies threaten your party and say, if you don't do this, we're going to... So you want to have a little bit more flavor. The outcome's 90% of the time going to be the same, combat. But don't just make it always a combat. Give your party a chance to handle things in other ways instead of just hack and slashing their way through. So what I would do is, whenever the goblins notice your party, if they notice them, I would have them shout something out in Goblin, like, hey, what are you doing? Who goes there? Whatever. If a member of your party speaks Goblin, they can interact with them. I had one group where a member of the party was a small race and they were a bard. And knowing that we were going to a goblin hideout, they disguised themselves as a goblin. And when the goblin shouted, they knew Goblin and interacted with them and actually talked their way past this into the cave. Now, they got discovered later on and it went downhill, but that was a way that they handled the situation without combat. Now, if your party captured one of the goblins earlier on the road, he can talk your way in. Or if you are going to go with the him betraying them route, this would be a great moment for him to betray them. So, if you end up doing combat and you slay these 2 goblins and the goblin boss, he has a pouch with 16 silver pieces in it. I like to go ahead and give my party a health potion. I would say he had 16 silver pieces in a health potion. It's not in the book, but it's a little bit of magic. It's a magical world. It gives him one more kind of little advantage for this dungeon. and they're going to need it. So once you've gotten past areas H2, H1 and H2, then you head into the cave. So everything in the cave is pitch black. The goblins have dark vision. Most parties, most members will have dark vision, but if you don't, they're not going to be able to see it all. They're going to have the blind condition. The ceilings in here are 20 to 30 feet with stalactites. There are some stalagmites scattered around that you can use for cover. There is that stream that runs up the main pathway into this cavern. As I said before, it's only like 2 feet deep. It's cool. It's not a big deal. You can walk through it really easy. It does create some sound. So if you want to decrease passive perception based on sound by 5, or give people trying to sneak advantage, that's perfectly reasonable because the water flowing is making a sound and it's a cavern. Because of the water also, it's a DC 15 perception to try and hear something happening in an adjacent cavern. So it's kind of noisy, it's dark. If your party uses a source of light, which some new parties will do, they are immediately picked out by any goblins within eyesight. The only chance they have of sneaking is to keep the lights out. So as you head in through the main corridor there is this little cavern off to the right, H3. So in there is 3 wolves, all attached to chains. The chains are all attached to a single spike in the floor. If in the fight outside, one of the goblins escapes, which he will do if his boss is taken out, he will be waiting here. And when you come in, he will pull that spike out and 3 wolves will jump you guys. If he didn't, and the wolves are still chained, they will come to the end of their chains and start, growling aggressively. If a party member attempts to calm the wolves, it's a DC 15 animal handling check. That DC is lowered to 10 if they use food, which I think is a great idea. Some of my parties have thought to use food, some have not. If they can't calm the wolves and they're in eyesight and the wolves know they're there, they're going to get more aggressive and they're going to make a DC 15 athletics check, and that will loosen the stake that's holding them in the ground. And then on the next round, if the party is still there, they will make another athletics check, but it's only a DC 10 the second time. And if they succeed on that, they will rip the stake out of the ground and all 3 wolves will attack. So if you calm the wolves, deal with the wolves, whatever, you can move past them deeper into H3, and there's a fissure that leads up to area H8. It's a DC 10 athletics to climb it. It's half movement speed to climb. The book says if you roll a 5 to a 9, you can climb it, but it takes 10 minutes. And if you roll less than 5, you fall, taking 1d6 falling damage. If your party does this, they're going to kind of backdoor their way all the way to the boss, which is fine. But just know they're going to skip most of this dungeon. They'll have to circle around and deal with some other stuff later. But this is effectively like a backdoor to the end of the dungeon. Now, I will say this. If one of your party members uses food or otherwise effectively calms one of these wolves, there is a decent chance that they're going to want to try to free him and befriend him. Especially if it's a new party. If they do that, I would allow it. D&D is supposed to be fun and fantastical and cool, and having a wolf companion is super awesome. If they are not a ranger or anything, that's okay. I mean, a wolf is not that powerful. They're probably going to end up dying later, which is going to be a heartbreaking storytelling moment, which is a good thing. So if they try to befriend a wolf, obviously they're going to have to make their animal handling checks, but let it happen. Let them have a wolf. It's cool. That's a neat little nuance. So back in the main passage, if they continue up, there's this cramped, steep passage off to the left. So if they attempt to climb up that way, it is strewn with rubble, so it's an extra 5 feet of movement for every square. They have to make a DC 15 perception check or be surprised by a giant poisonous snake that is coiled up in this passage. Obviously, if they're surprised, the snake gets their surprise round. It is coiled on this little ledge, and if your party member attempts to fight the snake, they have to balance on this ledge. And it's a DC 10 acrobatics check every time they make an attack. If they fail, they trigger a collapse of all this rubble. They have to make a DC 10 dexterity saving throw or take 2d6 bludgeoning damage. So you're starting to see why being level 2, because 2d6 could take out a level 1 party member. So that's that little western passage. I'm going to follow the main path for a little bit, and then we'll talk about what's over there later. So if you continue up the main path, you see this drawbridge stretched across. It's like 15 feet up. It is a DC 15 perception check to notice a goblin stationed on that bridge. It's a DC 12 stealth check for you to avoid being seen. It would be a group check if everybody's moving together. So as long as half the party succeeds on that DC 12 check, they are hidden. If they're carrying light, the goblin will see them no matter what. It's light in a cave, no way around it. If the goblin sees your party, he's going to shout flood, which the book has it written like it's in common. There is no reason for a goblin to ever speak common unless he wants a humanoid or other creature to understand them. He is shouting to other goblins. I would just say he shouts something in goblin. When he shouts this, that room you see with like the pools with the rocks around them, they're going to bust one of those dams and water is going to come rushing down that main chamber. Now, if you're within 10 feet of one of these side passages, you make a DC 10 dexterity saving throw and dive out of the way of the flood. If you are too far away or you fail that save, it's a DC 15 strength save or get washed down the tunnel as water comes flooding through. You get deposited in area H1. You take 2d6 bludgeoning damage and are prone. And then you got to head back up. So the book, if you can see there's two pools. The book says they can do it a second time. I would try to avoid doing it a second time, especially if you have members of your party that have low strength and they failed the first time. If your party all succeeds and none of them get washed down, hit them with that second one. But if like two members of the party or there's somebody who you know is not going to pass the save gets washed down, I think it would be pretty annoying, especially early, newer parties that don't have a lot of experience, to get just washed down this tunnel twice in a row. I understand why they did it, but I personally would try to avoid doing it twice. If you want to, if you're a sadist DM, go ahead and get them. So you head up the rest of that way, the tunnel, all the way up to area H7. There are 3 goblins and 2 wolves hanging out in here. If the goblin from the bridge ran over here, it'll be 4 goblins. If they're aware of you, they're going to be prepared. If you've made it this far stealthily, you'll be able to surprise them. But there's not a really good way to avoid combat. The book tries to say that there are other ways to resolve every situation other than combat. And I suppose you could try to talk your way through this, but that's not really realistic at this point. You're halfway into their hideout. They're goblins. You're probably mostly not goblins. So you're probably going to fight these guys. 4 goblins, 2 wolves. This is going to be decently tough for a level 2 party. If you haven't triggered the second flood, maybe they try and use the flood to their advantage during combat. There is like the stream coming out of one wall and crashing down in the pool and flowing out the other way. So even if you have combat in here, I would not say that in and of itself warns the rest of the dungeon that you're here if you've been able to avoid detection at this point. Just because the little stream, it is pretty loud and you don't want to just overwhelm your party with an entire dungeon full of creatures all at once. So once you've dealt with the guys in here, there are 2 paths out of here. There's that path down to area H8, and then there's the drawbridge. So H8 is the boss's room. The drawbridge leads to a goblin den and some other stuff. I would let your party decide which way they go. I would probably, they can roll a survival check, that's cool. But I would definitely explain to them that this H8 leading in and out of there is like a few sets of goblin footprints and one set of a bigger, heavier creature's footprints. I would say across the drawbridge are several sets of goblin footprints and drag marks like people being dragged. So it depends on what the party is interested in. If their primary goal is getting to the boss and defeating them, which some parties will do that, they're going to head to H8. Most parties, I think, especially young parties that are wanting to be heroes, they're wanting to save the day, they need to rescue the prisoners, they're probably going to follow the drag marks. So you follow the drag marks, you cross the drawbridge. That leads you over to area H6, the Goblin Den. So they need to make a DC 14 group stealth check to avoid being detected by the goblins as they approach the den. If you fail this check, it says that you are noticed by the goblins in the lower half of the den, which you can see this room's divided in half. That's like a 10-foot escarpment, and the book does not specify how many goblins are in the lower half. So it's 5 goblins and 2 goblin bosses all together. So I would probably put 2 or 3 of the goblins in the lower half. I would have them like rolling bone dice or playing cards, just, doing something for a little bit of flavor. But if you fail, they're going to attack you. It doesn't say whether or not the people in the top half are going to notice. I would say chances are they're probably going to notice. So put 3 goblins in the bottom half. Once they're defeated, or even as you're battling them, you can see there's like natural stairs that lead up to the top half. I would have the 2 goblin bosses and the 2 goblins up there kind of join in after maybe like the first round. Maybe have the 2 goblins like shooting arrows down. Maybe just have the bosses shouting stuff, or just one boss come over and shouting stuff. Because the other boss, once you get up there, he's over there with Sildar Hallwinter, Grundren Rockseeker's companion. He is like an almost 50-year-old seasoned human warrior. He gives me like a Sam Fisher from Splinter Cell vibe. Salt and pepper, but still athletic, still strong enough to handle himself. He is an agent for the Lord's Alliance, and it appears as if he has been badly beaten. He's been beaten so badly he has 1 HP. So if the battle looks like it is going poorly for the goblins, which ideally it will be, Yimmick, one of the goblin bosses, will grab Sildar and drag him over to that 10-foot drop-off, and he'll yell, truce or the human gets it. Truce or he dies. And he'll hang him over the edge of the ledge. If the party negotiates with him, he will say that he wants them to take out Klarg, the bugbear leader, and in turn, he will release Sildar and they can all go on their way. Sildar, in his badly beaten state, will urge the party not to trust Yimmick. And he is correct. Yimmick, if you do defeat Klarg, will try and force you to pay a heavy ransom. And if the party does not negotiate and attacks Yimmick, he will chuck Sildar over the ledge. He will take 1d6 falling damage, which is plenty to knock him unconscious because he only has 1 HP. And Sildar will have to start rolling death saves every round. If the party makes a medicine check, DC 10, uses a healer's kit, or uses some sort of magical healing, they can stabilize Sildar, or even with the healing, bring him back to consciousness. And then they can finish off Yimmick. Sildar will thank them. He'll be grateful, and Sildar has a good bit of information he can give the party, but he will not... It doesn't say this in the book. In my opinion, you should not get into a whole conversation right now. I would have him urge the party to finish clearing out the dungeon and that they can talk afterward. And I would have him make his way to the exit. All right, in area H8, you'll find Klarg the Bugbear, the leader of this little band, 2 goblins that are like Klarg's honor guard, and a mangy wolf named Ripper that's his personal pet. Now, for flavor, I would definitely try and jazz Klarg up a little bit. Maybe give him like a banner that he took from an enemy soldier, or like an enemy soldier's armor that he wears, or mixed match pieces of armor, or like a scar across his eye. Just make him a little more memorable than just he's a bugbear. I also would make sure that he talks to the party. I, for a long time, would not remember to have my bad guys talk. I would just be like, all right, we're fighting. We're silently attacking each other. Don't do that. Have him address the party, like, oh, you finally made it, whatever. But have him say some stuff. Even as you're fighting, have him say some stuff. Have him threaten the party, make him arrogant. Whatever you want to do, just make sure he talks. And again, this is when I would not attack first. I would have him talk down to the party, talk crap to them, and then eventually they're going to have had enough and they're going to attack. This room has a cool fire pit in the middle. You can shove guys in there. It's got that chimney from the wolves' den. You can try and shove people down there. All this stuff around the room is crates and barrels and sacks and stuff that are marked with the lion shield coster emblem. And if you take that stuff back to Phandalin, you will be rewarded. But one of the things that I like to do with this encounter to make it a little more fun and a little more exciting than just how you hit me, I hit him, is I like to add like a goblin shaman looking guy. Basically, he's just like a little goblin with like a bird skull on a stick and like teeth and stuff around a necklace. And he's a little shaman. But I don't use the Goblin Shaman stats. I just have him healing Klarg whenever it's his turn. So the party's going to be like, oh, we got to take care of this guy because he keeps healing the bad guy. And it just adds, maybe have him say some stuff. It just adds another layer of strategy and flavor to this combat. If everybody else is dealt with and Klarg is still alive, he will try to flee down the chute and escape. He's got to make the same checks as everybody else. He can possibly get stuck in the chute. But once you deal with Klarg, this dungeon is clear. You can attempt to get the supplies and stuff back. It would be difficult. I would say most parties are more likely to go to Phandalin and say, hey, this stuff's here. You may want to send some guys to get it. Like I said, even if they do that, I would probably still give them the 50 gold reward. And the thanks of the lady that runs the Lion Shield Coster. Before you leave the cave, if you search the supplies in Klarg's room, you will find an unlocked chest where he keeps his valuables. If you have a rogue in the party, go ahead and make it a locked chest so he gets to use his thieves tools to unlock it. But if you don't have a rogue, just make it an unlocked chest. He has 1,700 copper pieces, 150 silver pieces, 2 potions of healing, and a jade frog statuette with golden orbs for eyes that can easily fit into a pocket or a pouch. So make sure that they find that stuff before they leave. Now, Sildar is badly hurt, so I would have him beseech the party to accompany him to Phandalin. That way he can heal up. Once he gets a long rest, he'll be fine. He does have information. He will tell them that he was on his way to Phandalin to search for a wizard named Iarno who has gone missing. He will come up later. He will tell them that Grundren's sons found the map to Wave Echo Cave that is supposed to lead to the Lost Mine. He will tell them that Grundren, if you haven't already figured this out, he will tell them that Grundren was taken to Cragmaw Castle along with his map. And he will tell them that there were strange goblins, if you hadn't heard about that yet, from the goblins with the long skulls and the mystical powers. And he will also tell them, if they haven't heard yet, that Klarg is receiving his orders from someone named the Spider. Now, if you learned any of this stuff from the Goblin, I would not have Sildar re-say it because it's just going to be like, it's just going to seem stale if you have 2 separate people giving the same information. Just whatever stuff they haven't learned by investigating the Goblin, whether they've learned everything from the Goblins or nothing, I would have Sildar fill in the rest, and I would have him try and convince the party to continue to Phandalin. Some parties are going to want to immediately go try and save the dwarf. They're going to want to go to Cragmaw Castle. That's fine. You can run it that way. Sildar does not know where it is, and I would have him, through him, try to convince the party to go to Phandalin because they're going to learn more information in Phandalin. There's going to be a lot of helpful NPCs in Phandalin, and it's going to be basically like their adventuring hub for the first half of this whole campaign. So it's good to try and get them there and get them settled. And once they arrive, like they're approaching Phandalin, they see it, they're coming up on it, they're a few hundred feet from the gate or the entrance. That's where I would end chapter 1. I mean, that's where chapter 1 ends, but ideally that's also where you're going to end your session. I would probably go ahead and level my party up to level 3. I know that seems really quick, but there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of people to deal with. Level 3 is not overpowered. You're going to get your subclasses for everybody. They're going to get a little more HP. If you want to have them wait, that's fine. But I would probably go ahead and have them level 3. And this might have taken 2 sessions. You can probably get it done in 1. It depends on how long you play. But that finishes up chapter 1. We will get into chapter 2, which is basically the town of Phandalin and everything you need to know to run this hub town next time.